Hello, just a quick one before we get into today's episode. I'm running my next Amazon Seller Support and Connect session at 12:30 p.m. on Wednesday the 6th of May. It's completely free, and if you're selling on Amazon and feeling a bit stuck or you've got questions you want answered properly, this is for you. It's a relaxed session, part update, part Q&A, and you can bring whatever it is you're working on. I'm going to put a link in the show notes for you to book your place. It's completely free. I'd love to see you there.
Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week, I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to this episode of Bring Your Product Idea to Life. Today I'm speaking with Jason Harvey, the founder of Common Coffee. Jason grew up in New Zealand in an entrepreneurial family and had a clear idea of what it took to run his own business, but also the freedoms that came with that choice. He has a love for the outdoors, people and big picture thinking. On reflection, Jason says it's no wonder he ended up in coffee and he couldn't be more optimistic about the future of it. I had a fantastic conversation with Jason. He shared how and why he started Common Coffee with absolutely no experience in the coffee business. It was quite the leap, as he shares with us. He talks about running the business with his family, who joined him in the business a few years in, about what it takes to grow and scale a business, and all of the things he's learned on the way. And Jason had so many reflections that really made me think, and I'm sure you will feel exactly the same. So I would love now to introduce you to Jason. Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're so welcome. Can we please start with an introduction to you, your business, and what you sell?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name's Jason Harvey, originally from New Zealand, but I've been living over here in the UK for about 12 years now. I run or founded Common Coffee about 8 years ago. And primarily, we're a coffee roastery and a wholesale business. But we also have an online and retail presence. The business is based up in Scotland, just outside of Edinburgh. And we've recently partnered with a distributor out in Dubai and also into the US.
That all sounds really exciting. Thank you. And we'll get into the details about what's going on now a bit later. But what I'd love to do, if that's okay, Jason, is go right back. And can you tell us the story of how and why you decided to start Common Coffee?
I guess it was it wasn't really planned. It was a little bit of like following your nose and seeing where things led. So I guess I had an events business and it wasn't really working out. And it was a matter of choosing whether to move back to New Zealand or to continue on. And I'd met a farmer baker in Scotland a few years earlier, and in his workshop he had an old coffee roaster, and I ended up getting on the phone and giving him a call and saying, "Hey, how about we refurbish that coffee roaster and maybe we can have a go at starting a roastery up there?" And he said yes, and kind of went from there.
Oh, amazing. And what gave you the idea? Was it just like after you'd met him, was that seed already there, or?
No, so when we were in the events industry, we were just selling ice actually at music festivals. I guess I was like in my late 20s, and the person at our very first festival, the person next to us was doing very well, serving some pretty bad coffee, and I was like, oh well, we've invested into this industry and into this country. We might as well have a go at coffee as well. And I guess being a Kiwi and having a number of friends in London, kind of got on the blower and met a few other Kiwis who were into coffee, and it kind of grew out from there. But I guess I kind of fell in love with the industry from not so much the product point of view, but from the people side of it, and I really resonated. But it also had an element of I guess there's two parts to the industry, like specialty coffee and like commodity, and it didn't it feels like you had to know what you were talking about. So I guess out of that came an idea of like a flavor-led brand, and I guess that's where the foundations of Common kind of came from, to lead with like common terminology that people could get into coffee with and use.
That makes sense, because I think sometimes coffee can be a bit intimidating if you don't know about it. Like, you go to a shop and they'll say, what blend you want? And most of us just go, I don't know. I just
Yeah,
want it to taste good. So yeah, I guess there's a lot to learn. I think making it a bit more accessible so people can look and go, oh, I understand what that will taste like. Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's definitely needed.
And I guess that's kind of where we start. That's how we started. And that's where the idea kind of grew out from. And I think when you have a business that isn't doing so well, you've got lots of time to think because, you're like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I guess that's where that kind of entrepreneurial spark comes. Like you want to keep going, and I guess it's like a pivot really. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is good to know when it's time to like throw in the towel and try something new, because you can keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So I think it's actually a bit of a skill to be able to go, do you know what, this isn't working. Have to move on to something else.
I think when the money dries up,
Yeah.
sometimes you,
Well, yeah,
sometimes,
there's that as well.
sometimes your hands forced a little bit. But yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
So you knew someone who had a coffee roaster. Was it like out of service at the point when
Yeah, it was
you?
just sitting, not being used in a workshop up in Scotland. And I guess I've never been afraid to jump on the phone and just ask the question. Yeah, I did that. And, very thankfully, Jock and Fiona are the names of the people that kind of let us kind of move into their workshop and refurbish a coffee roaster and make a start. So, yeah, really thankful for that.
So starting something really different is a big leap, and it sounds like you had no experience in coffee or roasting. What gave you the confidence to just go for it? I mean, is that just something that you have, or was there something about the idea that gave? Cause like I say, it's a big move, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And, I've thought about this question for a while. And I think as you get older, you probably reflect on a little bit more on like your childhood and why you make certain decisions. And I think I can, I did a class when I was a kid. It was called the Future Problem Solving class. And I used to love it. And it was all about just making like, the teacher would give you a problem to solve, and you had a few materials like newspaper or sellotape, and you had to build something or something. And it was always different. And I really liked that class. And so I think I probably approach business from a little bit of like, okay, what is the problem, and how do we solve it? And it wasn't really to do with coffee or a product. It was just more like, okay, I enjoyed this industry and I'd learned some skills and I think it could be made more accessible. So how do you do that? And that's kind of where Common came from. And I guess that's probably what motivates me within that space. And so then the rest is kind of just like asking for help and like learning skills and stuff as you go, because and maybe that is something that I probably picked up as well. I've always been happy with asking for help, and um, I don't know where I got that from. Maybe I got it from my parents. Maybe it's just part of my upbringing. Maybe it's just that resourcefulness of like, I do notice that is maybe quite an attribute from New Zealand. Like you kind of just get stuck in and solve a problem. And so, yeah, maybe it's a combination of those things. But yeah, that's kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe.
I
I think
don't,
actually asking for help is something I hope people will take away from this, because I don't know your experience, but when you ask people for help, I think 9 times out of 10, they're happy to give it and actually kind of like being asked. But
yeah.
so many people I think are reluctant to ask, but it's like, oh, I don't want to put anyone out, or there's lots of reasons not to. But I'm trying to work towards, as you say, like just asking, because what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, for sure. I think people really, really, really do. And if I just think about my friendship group, and I wouldn't be able to do half the things that I've managed to do without a supportive friendship group or a supportive family. And they've always been willing to help. And I think, you know, I guess asking is the scary part. I think it goes hand in hand though. You need to be willing to receive help as well. Like I find it hard sometimes accepting help from some friends who will never ask for it in return, because I think it's like it needs to be a two-way street, because we do like we love to help people, but in order to help somebody else, you have to be able to receive it as well. So I think that sometimes that's, I don't know. Yeah, sometimes people struggle with that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And you don't want it to be like a transactional thing, but
Yeah.
it also kind of is, because I think if you ask something for someone, you have to be willing to help them in return. But if it's someone who you know would never ask you, yeah, I can see what you mean. It's
Yeah,
tricky.
I mean, you can think of it, but I guess we can think of it as a transactional thing, but you can also think of it as like, I think in just this is human nature to help, right? And like we all have different skill sets and we all have different attributes, and we feel more connected to other people when we help other people. And so then it has to go both ways, right? You have to be able to accept help if you're willing to give it, and vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the very early days of Common Coffee, because I think it's fair to say you were starting completely from scratch. So what did those early days actually look like? Because I think sometimes people can underestimate exactly what that means and what it involves.
Well, it's going back a bit now, 8 years. I guess, okay, so there's a concept, there's an idea, and then it started off with a business partner, and we worked together in the events business. So we'd already worked together for like 2 or 3 years, and so we were bouncing ideas off each other. And we had a friend who was a designer, and she'd helped with the first business as well. So she got stuck in as well. And so we kind of came together with a concept. And then from there it was like, okay, uh, picking coffees and roasting them and developing them, and within those flavor profiles. Um, and then it was through the event industry, I got introduced to a guy called Simon who runs a company called Stores in London, and they just like entered into the independent wholesale market in London, supplying independent cafes and restaurants. And they didn't have a coffee partner. Now, traditionally, this is not a route to market for specialty coffee. They normally go straight to the cafe. And he said, well, we're going to London Coffee Festival. Why don't you launch the business there? We'll be there in 6 weeks. And it was still a concept at this time. And I just, okay, let's do it, And so we had to take it from concept to reality in like 6 weeks. And it's all a bit of a blur, to be honest. Like, it just kind of happens. Like, you just get on with it. And I don't know, I think I'm very much of like, if I've said I'm going to do something and I've made a commitment to someone, I just make it happen, however that looks. And it might not go as you imagined, or definitely won't go as you imagined. But I guess, some way you can pull it together, and that's what happened. And then I think probably, as in most startups, we kind of focus so much on that goal of launching the business, I hadn't really thought about what's next. And so I guess that almost was the most challenging bit, because you got to that goal, you launched, you're like, you have come off on this big high of like, okay, we've pulled this product and this brand and this website and all these bits and pieces together to launch at what was, what is the world's biggest coffee show in London, which is pretty cool. And we got some really good feedback. But then comes the hard part. You've got to sell it, and you've got to build out a network. And I think that's when the real work began.
Yeah, I definitely. And we'll talk a bit about the show in a moment, but I'd love to know, do you think having those 6 weeks, like that deadline to get the brand launched, do you think that actually helped? Because
I love a deadline. Yeah.
I ask because I'm exactly the same. I think if you
Yeah.
gave me an indefinite amount of time, it'll take an indefinite amount of time, but give me a deadline and I'm on it. And I think a lot of people are perhaps similar.
Yeah. Even if you just self-impose a deadline, even it doesn't matter if you don't even hit them. Just as long as you're laying close, and it creates momentum. And I think momentum is hard to get in business, but once you've got it, you need to keep it. And and obviously you don't want to burn yourself or other people out, but keep moving things forward, and especially in a startup, because if you're working on something and you're not moving it forward, it might not be relevant in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So it's wasted time. So it needs to keep moving forward, because some things you don't know whether they're going to work. You have to test. And I don't know. I'm just, especially when you're small and you're young and you're agile, like test fast because it might not work. And if it doesn't work, I'd sooner know next week rather than the next month. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well with startups, it can be, and the other reason I think having a deadline is useful is because it can be really easy to think I have to get everything perfect, everything has to be lined up, all of these boxes have to be ticked, and that can just delay and delay and delay. But of course, until you put something out there, you've got absolutely no idea if it's going to work, what the reactions are, if you need to tweak anything. So I think there's something to be said for just, you know, launching and taking it from there.
Yeah, for sure. And then getting some feedback. Just get out there and get some feedback. That's I think that's one thing I probably would have done more in the early days is instead of just launching something, like actually take the concept and get more market feedback and refine it a little bit. We were very much deadline and launching products, and I think as we've progressed, it's probably a bit more. I'd probably do not slower, but I would probably take a concept and get 500 people to give some feedback on that product before launching it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how did the coffee show go for you? Did you pick up any orders there? How did it go?
Yeah, we picked up a couple of small little orders or interest. It was very early days, but yeah, a couple of little cafes ordered from us following the show, which was great. And we had some good social media presence, and we had some kind of good feedback from our peers. I mean, it's kind of you're launching into the specialty part of the market, and you're doing things in an unconventional way because you're leading with flavor, and that's not how things are normally done. And I guess what I've kind of learned over the years is you're probably trying to speak to a wider audience rather than the specialty, and you're trying to bring them into like high quality coffee. And so I guess that's kind of changed our approach moving forward. So back in the day, it was just a learning experience, really, to be there and to to get to that point.
Yes, that makes sense. But coffee, as you know, is so competitive. So at what point did you realize, okay, we've actually got something here. This is something, this isn't a niche we can do well in.
Um, I wouldn't say I've fully, I've fully realized what that point is just yet. But we're making the business is growing, we're making good progress. And I think it's once you start to build your community and you start after a few years, you have some subscriptions and they've been with you for 3 years, for 4 years, for 5 years. You're like, okay, some people really, really like this. And then we moved roasteries. We moved on from where we started. We're now based in Midlothian on the outs, and some other businesses come in and they're really supportive of what you're doing. And you build a community. And I think once that community becomes a little bit more solidified, then that gives you the confidence. You're like, okay, this is working. And then obviously the sales and stuff kind of move on from that. The wholesale part of the industry, it is tough because it's, every food and drink business within the wholesale, what they do to their wholesale partners or customers, they all have their nuances. And in coffee, it's closely linked with equipment. So it is super competitive. But we've always had good online sales, and as a percentage of overall, like our online customers, and we do a few events still and markets and that kind of stuff. And our sales through those channels are really good. So people resonate with the brand, which is what I'm really pleased about because that's the direction I would like to take the business.
Yeah, that's really important. And so I know that now you sell internationally. What were some of the things you think that helped you to grow and scale your business?
It is all very, very early days on the international scene. So really, we actually got some funding through the Scottish government to go to a trade show at the World of Coffee in Dubai, and both our opportunities came through that. So we picked up an independent wholesaler in Dubai, and they kind of sell online for us. And we're just in the process of kind of agreeing some wholesale terms with them in Dubai. And then the US, the opportunity actually came out of Dubai also. We met somebody at the trade show, and so yeah, we've just got our trademark and website and all that set up. So we've done all the groundwork, and it's we've got one customer out there so far. So it's about now kind of pulling all those pieces together and getting things moving. So very early days in the US, and the work in Dubai is ticking on nicely, but off the back of some international funding from the Scottish government.
Oh, it's exciting, though, because obviously you have to start, whatever it is, whether it's selling international or selling into wholesale, you obviously have to just start somewhere. So I think that's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. It is, it's exciting to have those conversations and to grow those networks. And it takes time. Like you need, it's not just a new territory; it's a new way of doing business. It's new contacts. It's new, you got to build up the trust with people and we're still a tiny team. Like the roastery itself is still less than 4 people. But we've got a new staff member starting next week. So, I think there could be the argument to be said that potentially moving too fast or you're not quite ready for it. But I don't know. I've always been an advocate. If an opportunity comes via your in front of you and you have the capacity to explore it, then I don't know. I think there's a purpose in exploring it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And so talking about growing your business, so you mentioned that obviously you sell into cafes, but you also have like an online side to the business too. Were you growing those together, or was there one sort of route you were focusing on first and then you expanded? Just thinking it would be useful for anyone who's also stuck in like a startup phase going, how do I split my time and my energies? What do I focus on?
Yeah, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
I guess so. We started wholesale and we just focused on wholesale. And I guess that's because that's the part of the industry that understood the most, and it probably requires the least amount of capital to get going. You just have to go out there and win a few accounts. You don't need to really spend too much on advertising or too much on marketing. It's more about establishing relationships with coffee shops and restaurants and so forth. And so that's, just slow and steady. We've had some customers that have been with us since year one, which is fantastic. And I think that's key, is not only, acquiring new customers or accounts is looking after the ones that you do have. So I'm really proud of that. And then from there, I guess the brand was always designed and kind of brought to life from the end user, like with retail in mind. So we've done that slowly, and I guess the foundations of who we are as a brand has kind of pretty much stayed the same. We're just about to launch some new packaging, so there's a little bit of change coming. And then it's, you'll know yourself, obviously, a lot of experience in Amazon and e-commerce. So it's a bit of a minefield about like how much to spend on advertising and what resonates the most and how to position and all that. And so I guess it's been a bit slower. In the past year, we're starting to see some results from some effort in that space. So that's promising, and I'm beginning to understand a little bit more how it works. But yeah.
Thank you. So obviously with such a small team, you've worked across so many different aspects of the business. So I guess sourcing and production and roasting and packaging, and in your experience, which part of like building the business has been hardest to get right? Or is it a culmination of everything? Because I realise that can be a quite tricky question.
I guess you're always learning, right? So like the whole process is a learning process, and it's, I guess, from coffee's exciting. Coffee is got so many layers to it, and if you are like, obviously we roast and manufacture our own product. It's not outsourced, so that means that extends to the sourcing from either the importer or the farmer, through the manufacturing process and on. So there's a lot of elements to that, but I find that exciting because coffee is such an integral part of, I guess, most people's lives, and it's an integral part of economies across the world. So that having such a large supply chain, I find kind of really interesting and exciting because there's lots to learn, and there's so much potential to explore how you can how a business can have an impact across that supply chain. And I haven't really gone too far into the sourcing stuff past working with the green bean importers, and we work directly with one farm, and that's probably a scale thing. So I don't have a huge understanding of the start of the supply chain. It's more the end, and so probably haven't fully answered your question just yet, but I'm trying to kind of give an overview. So I guess first and foremost, it's exciting. I find it exciting, and there's a lot to learn. Then it's about, I think there's only, I guess, one of me, and I'm trying to look across all these things. So it's like, okay, well, I have an understanding, but not an expert understanding in each area. How do I then build a team so that we can start to kind of focus roles and positions on each different aspects, whether it's selling or roasting or sourcing or advertising or marketing and so forth. So then I think then you have to then move, okay, well, what does the business stand for, and where is it going, and how do I trap the right people and the best talent to do those roles? And I think that's probably been the hardest bit, and it's probably just a personal reflection bit, is like really nailing down and understanding why Common exists and how to communicate that as effectively as possible so that we attract the right people into the business and they love working for Common. So I think I found that bit quite time consuming and a process to go through. It's been very enjoyable, but it's taken its time.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I guess, as you say, while you have an overview of the whole business, you do need specialists in those different areas. And so how was the you mentioned before, the people that you know. So have you managed to recruit people into the business, or have you had to go like further afield to recruit?
So it is a little bit of a family business. My parents became involved in the business maybe 5 years ago, and 5 years ago. And my dad, Mark, he really loves the people side of business from HR perspective. So we have been working together about how we go around, finding really, really, really good people and communicating who we are as a business. And so I listened to one of your podcasts earlier about how I forget the lady's name that was on it, but it was about running family businesses. And so working out how me and Dad would work together and like what works and what doesn't work, that took its process, and it led to some really interesting conversations, which I think has been really beneficial for both of us, and the relationship between two of us. But that took its process because we made a few, I wouldn't call them mistakes, but we were misaligned about what it is that we're looking for. And in the past 12 months, I think we've worked through that, and we've really come into more alignment about, okay, well, the business needs this attribute and this personality and this for this area. And we've designed recruitment campaigns around that. And so it's feeling like things are really moving forward in the right direction now. So yeah, I guess that's how we went about it. And I think we just had to find the best way of working together first before we kind of invited people into the business. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And do you think it was hard having your dad join the business like a few years in, rather than being there at the start. The reason I asked this, I guess the dynamic's slightly different because by the time he joined, you kind of had things up and running. You knew presumably how you wanted to run things, what your vision was. How was it like bringing someone in at that stage?
If I was to be honest, it's like my parents have been absolutely fantastic, and I feel very fortunate to come from such a supportive family. They both had their own businesses as growing up, so I was always in that kind of entrepreneurial environment. But to be honest, I think if they hadn't have got involved, the business might not be here, because I went through such a challenging part of it that I was probably pretty ready to throw the towel in. And if I didn't have that support, probably before they got officially involved, they just played a support role really to me, even though they were on the other side, they're back in New Zealand. So yeah, I think that's how it started. And then I guess after a year or two of them kind of just helping out and supporting me, we kind of made a decision. I was like, oh, okay, well, we're going to go for this. And we prepared to work together and make it a little bit more official and maybe a different way of going about it, because maybe sometimes kids get involved in parents' businesses as opposed to parents getting involved in kids' businesses. But I really like it. I wouldn't have it any other way. And one thing we've noticed in the recent rounds of we've been hiring recently is people have made comment during the interview process that they're like, oh, this is great that it's a family business. We're really excited by that. So it is something that I think people are looking for. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's how it's kind of how it's evolved. And I guess it's just some tough conversations, and if both parties are willing to have those conversations and listen to each other, then I think it can work.
Yeah, I think, well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that if you can make it work, I think working with your family must be really special. And I think in your example, it sounds like your parents had so much experience of running their own businesses. It must have been great to have them be able to bring that experience to you as well.
Yeah, I try and think about it from like my parents' perspective a little bit. And I guess without making too many comparisons, I think of like some friends and like, you know, their parents see a glimpse of their lives, you know, maybe on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. But I probably speak to my parents on a daily basis, and they see a large part of my life, and they're actively involved in my life now that I'm an adult. And I think for maybe a lot of parents, that well, it depends, I guess, on everyone's situation. But I mean, I think I know that both my parents are really grateful for it, and I think a lot of parents would love to be involved in their kids' life if they had the choice, or they could be. And I think business provides a great way for that to take place. So from that perspective, if thinking about it from my parents' perspective, I think it's great. And if I think about from my own perspective, I guess it's, you know, you've got a lot to learn, and I think sometimes, especially when you're younger, you think you know everything, and you kind of don't. And you know, and you know, I'll give you an example of actually one thing I said to my dad maybe a year ago. When I was growing up, they let me learn my lessons by trying and failing and reflecting and then doing again. And they let me learn those lessons that way. And I can imagine that's quite hard as a parent, because, you know that the mistake's going to happen, or that relationship's not going to work out, or like they're going to lose money on that choice in business. But they let me do that. And I was really, really thankful for that. But I did say to Dad about 12 months ago, appreciate your parenting style, but if you think we're going to make a mistake in the business, you can stop that parenting style now, and you can tell me that that's not a good idea, or I don't think we should do that, and let's cut out some of the pain that's unnecessary from the experience that you've had running businesses for 30 or 40 years. So that was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it sounds like a really useful conversation to have, though.
Yeah, for sure.
If you don't mind changing the subject slightly, I know before we spoke, you referenced a packaging mistake that you made a while ago. Are you happy to share that story and like what happened and maybe if there's anything you learned from it or anything that changed going forward.
Yeah, so we bought to market Specialty Instant. It's produced out of New Zealand by a company called Newground Coffee. We were the first Scottish roastery to bring it to market, and I think in the first or second in the entire UK. And the mistake was just basically, I didn't think there was a mistake. We sent it off, and we were at launch day. The packaging arrived. I picked it up, and I'd printed the wrong use-by date on the packaging, and I saw it instantaneously. And we'd ordered $35,000 worth of stock or pounds worth of stock, and it's not that it had already expired, but it was going to expire before the actual expiry, which is like 10 years. So anyway, it happened because when I was reviewing the final packaging, it was January, and you know how your brain doesn't always tick over to that it's a new year.
Yes.
I hadn't done that, and so I didn't catch it. So I think, like most mistakes, you kick yourself quite a lot, but I guess after a week or two, you're like, well, I can't do anything about it. I need to kind of deal with it. And so I guess it led to an opportunity. So from that, I kind of said, okay, well, the idea came of like, well, where is the date presented differently in the world? And so my brain was like, well, America presents the date differently, so it's going to give us a little bit more time and to sell the stock, because we didn't have enough time in the UK to sell it before that packaging mistake came to fruition. And so it was kind of like off the back of that met the person that I've now partnered with in the US, and got underway over there, and it kind of led to that opportunity, and so now we're all set up in the US and things are underway, and we've done another production run, and so I guess it's I shared this in an article. It all depends on how you think about a problem. If it's a problem and then it remains a problem, well, it will continue to be a problem. And I guess if you can kind of quickly accept responsibility, figure out, okay, well, that's obviously silly, it shouldn't have happened, it won't ever happen again, but what's the opportunity off the back of it, or what have I learned? And then things open up. And so, probably if it wasn't for that mistake, we probably wouldn't have launched into the US when we did. And as we were launching, we secured a pretty big customer in the US. So we supply Time Out in Union Square, which is fantastic. And had we not registered and been underway in the US, then we wouldn't have been able to supply that customer. So I don't know. Yeah, you can turn it into an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the club you mentioned you went to when you were a kid. And I was thinking, I wonder if that's helped you develop, or maybe it's something you've had as part of you or seen in your parents, like that potential to kind of look for a solution rather than a problem. Because I think that's a real strength, isn't it? Being able to go, okay, something's happened, it's not ideal, now what? Rather than just letting it derail you completely.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think where I'm now at is realizing that, there are solutions to all these problems, and I think that's a really good way to think about it. But what I've learned more so in recent years is sometimes that solution doesn't need to be acted out just now. So what I mean by that is that sometimes the best solution hasn't presented itself yet. So whilst you don't need to think of the situation as a problem on an ongoing basis, it doesn't mean you need to solve it in the moment in which it feels uncomfortable, because sometimes that's not the best solution. So sometimes it's okay just to kind of wait until you have a better idea or a better solution presents itself. And I think that's probably just a little bit of time under your belt and getting used to that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good reflection, because I know what you mean. It can be really tempting to just be really reactive and go, something's happened, I need to do
Yeah,
something in response. I think, yeah, I definitely have that in me of like, oh, something's gone wrong, I need to, be on it. But I think you're right. Sometimes giving things a bit of breathing space probably
yeah,
is the best thing, but it can be so hard to do when it's your business and you're like, you just want everything to be smooth.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I think that just sometimes it's hard just to sit in the fact that things are not all right, or like you don't have the solution just yet. But I guess I don't know. Sometimes have just a bit of faith that the solution will come. And you might not have met the right person, or had the right idea, or had the right reflection just yet. But generally, if you just give it a bit of time, it will come. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. So, for anyone listening who has an idea for a product or a business, but they haven't started yet, is there anything that, in your experience, people overthink at this stage of like, the startup phase and that, yeah,
Um, I think it's probably all to do with you want to do what's comfortable for you, right? And it's all to do with um, your risk threshold, I guess, or your risk tolerance. I'm probably a big advocate for giving it a go and just 2 feet in and jump on and get on with it. But I know that's not everybody, and so um, I would probably always give the advice of, if you've got an idea, well, test it and like don't sit on it too long. Do what you can to bring it to market, but maybe do it alongside a job that you do 4 days a week or something like that. Or don't put yourself in I guess a um, undue stress if you don't have to. But also know that at some point you are going to have to, bring your other foot across the line and go 2 feet in. Like at some point you're going to have to do that. So, and then I think if you're not prepared to ever do that, like never to go fully into the idea, then maybe it's not for you, and that's okay as well, because you know there's plenty of different ways in which you can live life. You don't have to, you don't have to have your own business and run it. But I think just knowing that at some point you're going to have to be all in um, is an important thing to reconcile in your mind. Is that whether you do it at the start, or whether you do it in a year's time, or whether you do it in 5 years' time, at some point, if it's going to work, you're going to have to go all in.
yeah, that's really useful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, is there anything you see people like underestimate when it comes to building a business? Anything you'd like people to know now before they get started?
It takes a long time. Yeah. um, yeah, I think it takes longer than you think it's going to take, and maybe that's okay. I think maybe probably something that I probably reflect on is that, yeah, sometimes the slowness of it means that you can maybe get some of the simpler mistakes out of the way when it doesn't, you know. I think we learn experientially, and so it's not a question of whether you're going to make the mistake or not. You probably are at some point, and making them early, whilst they still hurt, costs less money than making them later on. So yeah, I guess be prepared to move slowly. That's going to take some time. You're going to have to work quite a few Friday nights and weekends and all of that, but then the freedom will come, and you might have a little bit more control over your own timetable, which is pretty rewarding.
Thank you. And I think that's really useful for people to hear, because I think sometimes what gets presented, if you follow brands online or wherever you get your content, it sometimes can look like things have happened really fast,
Yeah,
but it's because you don't see like the year or whatever it took for someone to get to the launch phase or however long it is. I think, yeah, I think often what we see online is a bit skewed. We can feel like everyone's moving so quickly and things are just happening, but you just don't see so much of it. So I think that's really useful for people to hear.
I think especially if you're following like your competitors' social media and things like that, and if you become too obsessed with what your competitors are doing, then you're like, oh, we should be doing this or we should be doing that. But all those ideas started 9 or 12 months ago. You're just seeing the end result. Like we've got some new packaging coming out in 2 weeks' time, and that process started 9 months ago. And there was a whole up and down process all the way along. So, yeah.
Thank you. And if you were starting again today with like all the experience you have now, is there anything you'd do differently?
Well, I'd like to think so, because I've hopefully learned a bit along the way. I think maybe just back to some of the points I probably touched on earlier. I would probably test some of the product ideas earlier on. Probably would be a little bit more firm in some of my negotiations and with customers and with suppliers. I think, in the early days, you just want things to work. And sometimes you accept conditions that aren't beneficial to you or your business in order just to really, really make it work. And I think there's as much power in saying no to something as there is in saying yes to something. So, yeah, probably a little bit firmer in negotiations. Trust my gut a little bit more in terms of like hiring, for sure. I think that if I reflect upon some of the situations that didn't go as well as hoped, I had a gut feeling on it, and so I'd probably listen to that a little bit more. And and probably just do a little bit more product testing. Probably not too dissimilar to most founders.
Yeah. Thank you. And now this is my final question, Jason. Okay. What would your number one piece of advice be for other product business owners?
Number one piece of advice would be believe in what you're doing. You have to believe in what you're doing and have faith in it. And I think that's the one of the biggest things. Don't get me wrong, you're going to have days where you question it a little bit, but like you need to come back to that kind of belief, and hopefully you're fulfilled by what you're doing. And I think that's the biggest thing. So make sure you find your space. And I guess finding the space to believe and have faith in what you're doing, it probably is linked to health, is making sure that you yourself are, eating well and in a healthy place, so that you can have that kind of mind space to think in that way. I think that would probably be my biggest piece of advice.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for everything you've shared and for your time today. Awesome. I'll put links to everywhere people can find you and Common Coffee in the show notes of the episode. And cool. Thank you again.
Thanks, Vicky. Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. Hello, if you're selling on Amazon or you're planning to and you'd like ongoing support as you go, I've just opened the doors to my membership, Amazon Made Easy. It's a space for product-based business owners who want expert guidance, somewhere to ask questions, and a bit of structure and accountability while they build and grow on Amazon. Inside, you'll get regular live Q&A calls with me, optional co-working sessions, practical resources, and a supportive community of people all working on similar things. It's designed to make selling on Amazon feel clearer, simpler, and much less overwhelming, and to give you somewhere to go where you're stuck or unsure of what to do next. You can join at any time and stay for as long as it's helpful. And if you'd like to take a look, you'll find the full link in the show notes.